because RPAC is about what happens at the Capitol, right? It's about the advocacy work that we do and helping to shape legislation that ultimately helps us all get to the closing table and do more closings. So welcome all for that. I'd like to acknowledge the people that are really putting their money where their mouth is as it relates to RPAC. So first, I'd like to invite up to the stage our Hall of Famers. If you are an RPAC Hall of Famer, please come up to the stage. All the Hall of Famers. These people have dedicated over $25,000 to the PAC over the years, and they are putting their money where their mouth is. Not only to help them in their industry, our consumers, but also to make the business better for you. Now I'd like to acknowledge the platinum investor. Anybody who's a platinum investor, there's actually a couple of platinum investors up here, Gus included. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you, Golden. Where are Golden? Golden? Anybody at Golden level? No? There you go. Come on up. Come on up. Our Sterling investors, come on up. Crystal, my bad. Crystal Orange, thank you. Yeah. And then our Sterling, last but not least, our Sterling investors, come on up. Our major investors, these are people who have put not only their time going up to advocacy, not only to speak on your behalf, on behalf of Miami Realtors, but also they're putting their money where their mouth is. So let's get it all up for them. Everybody, thank you very much. So next, who would like to raise their hand and say, I'm game. I want to do this. I'm next. Who wants to be up here next? All right, well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you a guy who really needs no introduction to this group, our 2024 Chairman of the Board and our 2025 PAC Chairman, Gus Fonte.
All right, so we all know why we're here. We're here to listen to what happened this year at the Capitol during session that is of value and importance to us as realtors and as major investors, future major investors, why we're putting our money here and why we're focusing, and how our legislators are carrying our message to Tallahassee. So today we're very, very happy, very fortunate to have not one, not two, but for the price of one, 3 state senators on our stage today. I actually thought the name of the event was Capitals to Cocktails. So that's what my mind was. So without any further ado, let's get this going. First up, I would like to ask my own state senator, Alexis Catali, to come up. She gets to go first. Second, Ana Maria Rodriguez, where are you? And last but not least, Senator Jason Pizzo. Thank you all guys for being here. I appreciate it. So before I start with the scripted questions, just something that we were thinking as we were talking here. Given the temperature that we're seeing across the United States and the country and in Tallahassee, how were things this session up there? Everybody, move up. How were things up there? Give us your insight as to, what was happening. Was there any
question. How is the temperature in Tallahassee? Well, it was hot, and I'm not referring to the temperature like Jack Levine says in his logo. It was very interesting in the sense that I thought going into it, yes, there was a position that the legislature took collectively, the House and Senate, to kind of show their autonomy from the governor. I think for the last few years, we've kind of been like a rubber stamp in many ways for whatever the governor wanted to accomplish. And I thought many of his proposals were actually pretty good. Some of them I wasn't so much in agreement with, but we went along with many of his suggestions. But this year, we have two presiding officers that felt that it was time for us to reestablish our autonomy. And so with that, the Speaker of the House, who happens to be from Miami, Danny Perez, I think kind of led the charge, right, in making that distinction. Our Senate President is a little more traditional, has a little more decorum in a way in his communication style. And so now we're at a point where we were supposed to finish session on Friday, but we didn't technically finish. So we're now extended indefinitely as of a memo exchange that happened this afternoon. And here we are, we don't have a budget, but we did pass some good bills, and there were some really bad ones that didn't pass, we'll talk about that later. So it's a very unpleasant situation right now, if anyone else wants to.
Senator Pizzo, because there was no drama with you, so.
No, I have nothing to report, so I'll just pass it on to Senator Claudio. Although you can see me on 3:30 CBS, 5 o'clock on NBC, Sunday at the. Let me add this. Senator Rodriguez, since day one in 2018, when we both came in, and then serving in the 2019 calendar year, and then Senator Claudio, have heard me say ad nauseum in committees and on the floor, and I think here last year, where I only brought my reading glasses so I couldn't see anybody in the audience, that the legislature really needed to get its autonomy back, to act as a separate branch of government. We jokingly use the bullseye when we go to talk to little kids in classes about where you live and who you love and who you care about as the center of your universe. But it's not a democracy, right? Because mom makes the rules, interprets the rules, and enforces the rules. And then when you get outside of that neighborhood idea, and then city, and then county, and then state, but to Senator Rodriguez's credit, it's wonderful here to hear, it's refreshing that this is the first time we really got back our autonomy. And also, just in passing on the Senate floor, I changed my party.
I think that I'd add, particularly of importance to this group here. We're having major conversations that are kind of one of the flashpoints of the contention between the Senate and the House on property tax relief. And the question of sales tax relief versus property tax relief versus something else in terms of Floridians feeling that their money's in the back of their pockets that otherwise would have been in the state coffers. So particularly when we're talking about the extension of legislative session, that is one of the major points of contention that have those proposals on what we are going to do, what we're not going to do, what we're going to consider, discuss amongst ourselves, is one of the major factors that are delaying the budget and the finalization of that.
So now, everybody here should have a cheat sheet so you can follow along, and if we say something that is incorrect, raise your hand, we will correct them. HB 913, which is condominium transparency. I think everybody understands the issues that we've had. I think Senator Pizzo, you were on this bill. So give us your idea of background, impact that you see with it, and the importance of the tweaks and changes that were made.
I didn't get this cheat sheet, so Gillen and give us the so we're in the car on the way over. It's fine. I'm pretty sure it's not no
help
stuff.
write the bills.
You know it like the back of your hand.
That's okay. How many were here several months ago? I saw at least 15 people.
Yes.
Okay. And you remember I was seated here, Representative Lopez was seated here, and she said that under no circumstances whatsoever would any condo-related bill extend anything. We did. And I don't mean that in a snarky sense. It's just, the governor had held a, you remember, a roundtable in Miami Lakes, and then did one in Pinellas County. Surrounded himself with a couple of sort of older, more, board members from central casting, right? Like, let's put the octogenarian at the table and talk about how everything's fine, and I'm on fixed income and I can't do anything, and I won't be able to afford anything and do anything, yada yada. Leave out the part about they haven't collected $1 in reserves for 38 years and they have 100% equity in their unit. Leave that part out, and then, sort of woe is me. We took a very hard look. We didn't sort of beat our chest or take any credit or stamp our feet about the fact that by that point, the three of us, Senator Bradley and I, had done 21 or 22 town halls. Our office's last count is we had been in a room with more than 20,000 people at that point, listening to condo owners, board members, CPAs, accountants. We held a summit of professionals, stakeholders, and here's where we arrived at. We arrived at greater clarity and gleaning down exactly what condos both need, and try to get them. Senator Bradley and I are both attorneys to some extent, and the general idea is hear your clients' wishes, in this case our constituents or sort of clients to that extent, and get them to where they need to be. Perhaps they have a rudimentary idea or a very raw idea of where they should go or what the process should be, but let's just get them to a happy place, to a place of comfort. And I think that the bill achieves that. There were widely disparate, when I was here last, the House pretty much had their framework for what their bill was going to be, and quite honestly, it was a little too developer friendly. And I'm from a development family. That's the business I grew up in. I look at something for its highest and best use or better use, but it was really just tantamount to setting up for failure in a lot of situations. So you guys have a wonderful cheat sheet, and the best thing to do, this is a really big cheat sheet, and this will help you too with a bunch of other things if you don't indulge me for a second. On flsenate.gov, there are 3 boxes. You can choose a bill, you can choose a stat. Go into keyword search, and you can do it by bill, and you get the bill analysis. But the best thing is just put keyword searches in there, and the breakdown of bill analysis and the effective proposed changes. These things go from 11 pages to 50 to 150 pages. But here's the bottom line. We are pushing things back another year, okay, essentially. And one thing that we heard from a lot of realtors is, have you guys considered allowing lines of credit to be used, because you don't necessarily know what you have to pull down and tap. There was a chicken and egg problem of, we know and identify what the issues are with buildings, but we might not be able to go ahead and put a shovel in the ground or start construction or start repair or renovation, but we don't want to not be complying with the statute that you guys passed, because it was sort of in a vacuum. We said, do it by this date with no consideration of how long does it take to get 3 bids, or how long does it take to get somebody out there to commit to it, or is it the right one or the right price? So the big takeaway is, from credit unions coming to us to lines of credit, you do not have a condo association where the replacement cost is not far in excess of the land value, where it makes no sense to only be sentimental to salvage. There is no situation where anyone should be bitching about they can't get the work done. And this is the analogy I think I used, I actually got out of here last year, which is this. Everybody wants their kid to go to college at some point. Some parents are going to be able to pay full tuition. Some parents are going to need financial aid. Some kids are going to need scholarship. Whatever it is, our mindset, Senator Bradley and I, especially in the Senate, was your kid wants to go to college, you want to keep your unit, we will find a way, a pathway to make sure that you are not displaced if the numbers make sense. I just leave you with this. What we did not remedy by design is the fact that we have some properties where the dirt, the land, is worth 2 to 7 times what the unit value is. And when people continue to bitch about that, they are not a sympathetic victim. Does that make sense? And that's the situation that we find ourselves in still in a couple places, especially my district. I have the entire coast of Broward and Sunny Isles and Aventura. And some of those properties are 48, 51 years old, sitting on property that's worth 6, 7 times what the value is. So a number of great things. DBPR, as I've long badmouthed, has been incredible the past few months. They're instant, they're reactive. We've given them greater authority and pathway. We've had several meetings with them, and I'll text the Secretary of DBPR at 2 o'clock in the morning to get a 7 a.m. remedy, and it's happening. So it's very encouraging. But again, so that's the cheat sheet, the bill analyses are great, and I'm happy, after this, I guess we take any particular questions as it relates to that bill, but it's really long, and I don't wanna, I'm gonna shut up.
Thank you. There are some nuggets in that bill that are very important that everybody should read because you're gonna be able to explain to clients that when they complain to you. So I would recommend go online, download it and read it. Ana Maria, you passed, what bill it was, 322? On squatters, which is near and dear to my heart. A little synopsis.
Yes, so the commercial squatters bill was born out of a residential squatters bill which passed last session. And as I referenced Danielle Blake in her infinite wisdom, says, hey, Ana Maria, why don't you file a commercial squatters bill next session? And I said, you know, that's a great idea because that bill did not encompass commercial properties. And of course, we took it to our members and they loved the idea, so kudos to our commercial board as well. And from that moment forward, we filed the bill and it sailed through committee. It was actually a very easy bill to pass. I didn't get any questions, which is always good. And we passed it. So basically what it does, in essence, is it gives a sheriff the authority to go in and remove squatters, whereas before, you know, it was a very long and onerous process. I mean, some of you have contacted me privately to help to get these squatters out, and now you don't have to do that. It's just a very seamless and a very fast process. So for those of you who are commercial practitioners, this is a big step forward in that arena. So I'm very excited to have sponsored that.
Thank you very much for that, because I'm one of those that has had problems. Senator Gonzalez, you fine-tuned a little bit the Live Local. So give us a little bit of 1730, what is in there that makes it better than it was before?
Thank you for the question. We usually say that in the Senate. I guess I haven't like reprogrammed myself yet. Thank you for the question. We're so excited about what we're able to do for the local. So particularly important is the preemption that we've had on commercial, mixed use, and industrial property. We found that a number of counties and municipalities have used different zoning categories to also encompass the work that's done in commercial, mixed use, and industrial. And so a number of properties that would be perfect for a Live Local project have been excluded from the category. We defined what industrial, mixed use, and commercial means. So if that use is being conducted in any other named zone property, that property can now be used for a Live Local project, or eligible for the height, density, and floor area ratio by right entitlement. We also worked, one of the final moments of session on this bill was to ensure that for historic districts, there was the opportunity for any Live Local project to have the responsibility to replicate a historic district's facade. So we also worked to consider height. So there are certain communities, whether that's next to single-family home neighborhoods, so adjacent on two sides of single-family home neighborhoods. We did something that actually Senator Pizzo had recommended 2 years ago in his infinite wisdom. And that was to create a ceiling on the height that the preemption would allow for areas right next to single-family home communities. So we capped that at 10 stories if there's a 10-story building within a quarter of a mile from that area. Similarly, in historic districts, we limited the height preemption to what is within 3/4 of a mile away. Across the bill, we worked on tweaks to make sure that height, density, floor area ratio was at the highest possible allowable use. So we tacked that to July 1, 2023, the day of the effective date of the original Live Local Act, so that any counties and municipalities who felt that they were going to reduce their height, density, and floor area ratio post Live Local to stunt the possibilities that the legislation provided to workforce housing across the state was impossible. Whatever was applicable by that date, or any increases over that time forward, development that was focused on 40% workforce housing would have the capacity to enjoy the highest height, density, and floor area ratio, unless they had those necessary handicaps of being adjacent to single-family home neighborhoods or in a historic district. So we worked really hard with stakeholders, and at the end of session, worked very diligently with Representative Vicky Lopez to make sure that we had a product that we could all count on. We carved out the Everglades Protection Area, the Kiva Study Area, different environmentally sensitive areas from potential Live Local Act development in the future. But I think across the board, to all extent, we strengthened the legislation, provided greater access to properties to the live locals, and made sure that in a very practical but very sensitive way, engage with municipalities and counties to make sure that we're all being good partners.
Just a quick follow-up, how are you seeing this, everybody here is pretty much South Florida. Are you seeing an impact of this across the state? Because I know we see it down here where there's a lot of projects that have been announced and some that are in construction, but across the state, is this being successful?
I think one of the most exciting developments is one of the new project areas we've added to Florida Housing Finance Corporation's State Apartment Incentive Loan Program. It's called a transformational grant. It's up to $25 million for at least 1,000 unit development that has an educational component, a healthcare component, and a couple other provisions. We're seeing that go up right outside of Orlando. And that $25 million grant, has been accessible to that transformational product. And we're seeing across the state more and more opportunities for folks to find the right spots to build these type of projects, whether it's 100 unit, 200 unit development, or these big ideas that are really trying to take care of right outside or right within metropolitan communities. It's happening everywhere. I think something related to budget that we've still been hashing out is the question of how much money are we going to invest this year in the State Apartment Incentive Loan Program. There's been proposals from the House of Representatives to cut that funding. Similarly with the Hometown Heroes Program for down payment assistance. Those are items that we will need continued support and advocacy from you all as the Senate works to hold strong on these investments that we feel are needed, and frankly, that without the realtors, I don't think we'd have the Hometown Heroes Program, or this continued investment that was initiated in an aggressive way through the Live Local Act in the State Apartment Incentive Loan Program and the SHIFT program.
The Hometown Heroes, you guys are going back theoretically at some point to finish a budget, and these extra items are going to be included? We're hoping to get money in there?
Gus, I think Hometown Heroes is something that everyone's already gotten accustomed to, whether it's a high dollar amount or middle or low, that's to be determined, but I don't think it's gonna be eliminated. It's just a matter of figuring out where we're gonna land between the two budgets. And that also goes for My Safe Florida Home and My Safe Florida Condo, which have been very popular programs to basically make our properties more resilient, which helps in turn to lower insurance premiums. We're big proponents of that, obviously from the real estate side, but the Senate and the House have been very strong on making sure that the funding for these programs remains intact.
On the condo portion, or for the condo version of the My Safe Florida Home Program, last I was here, we talked about how it was basically effectively impossible to go ahead and take advantage of that program because it required 100% of ownership to agree to it. Have any of you ever had an experience where 100% of condo owners in the same complex agree on anything? No, not even the day of the week. So one of the things that we pressed for, and Tom Leak had a bill this year that was very popular, to go ahead and lower that threshold. I think it should be a little lower, but to lower it from 100% down to 75%. Now here's the thing, the last time we were here, the bill had already been signed into law because we had passed it in early session last year through all committees, House and Senate. It was presented to the governor, he signed it, and that My Safe Florida Condo pilot program was supposed to be up and effective July 1st. The website didn't publish to start taking applications until November 14th. It was oversubscribed by November 19th. And it was only $30 million, pretty low administrative costs. I thought it was gonna be a lot more, but not a dollar of that program has gone out yet. It's up to $175,000 per condo association unit, up to $1,500 per unit. In those places that desperately need it and it's necessary, at its second to last stop, I actually filed an amendment to put on the bill to add $500 million to the condo, to the program. And everyone was like, screw you, Pizzo, because everybody wanted to vote for it, but couldn't because it might disrupt some budget conversations and all that stuff. But I was like, listen, we could blow through $500 million in My Safe Florida Condo Pilot Program grant money for these mitigating kind of components in a week and a half. I mean, literally, it would be out in a week and a half. We spent a lot of money on the single-family detached homes. They were like, we appreciate it, but it's not a friendly amendment, we're not accepting it. And then at long last, we're not adding any money to the condo pilot program. It's the same 30 million that we haven't spent from last year that rolls over to this one, unfortunately.
We can only hope and call. We can only hope and call the rest of the state.
We can take them outside the parking lot and tell them, I'm sorry.
You're in Miami, that works. Resiliency, flood risk, and environmental protections. There was a bill, SB 180, something that Florida Realtors was pretty strong on, which is the one about look-back periods. Any of you free want to take a shot at it?
Yeah, so I think particularly important, I mean, we've had 4 years of disastrous storms and communities around the coastline that are trying to rebuild. And I actually had this recurring Uber driver in Tallahassee that was a woman whose home was completely destroyed. And she was living in Tallahassee with her, I think it was her daughter-in-law, and not sure what she was gonna do next because she didn't receive enough money from FEMA and pulled together all the resources provided to rebuild that home. So what this legislation does is make sure that the additional requirements for significant reconstruction are not applied to someone whose home is destroyed because of a hurricane or a natural disaster. And the goal of the legislature, I mean, we end up providing hundreds of millions of dollars to each of these communities when this happens. And the best we can do is ensure that they have the capacity to rebuild at the lowest cost possible and to keep their lives moving. So that's what that legislation aims to do, holistically, to provide the best opportunity for these folks to rebuild in a cost-effective manner without all the additional requirements that otherwise would make it impossible for them to restart their lives.
Couple of, and to that point, on the realtor side, you're gonna have to update a lot of leasing agreements. The lease agreements are gonna have those disclosures. One of the most popular components on like Realtor.com app is to scroll down now, especially in single-family homes, to see what flood risk is. It's like, ooh, that's a great house. Ooh, 7 out of 10 flood risk now. And of course, FEMA redid their maps not too long ago. So it's really about disclosure to that point, but lease agreements will have to be updated. And really just sort of alerting people, you know, what's going on. We had Kevin Guthrie, who's basically our state FEMA director for Division of Emergency Management. After the April storms, and then again storms last year, he and I were hooking up water pumps at mobile home parks in Hallandale in the middle of the afternoon, and the public works guys were like, you guys look familiar. But we went to one house where a rabbi was living with his wife and children, and he had just started renting there, and the landlord never said anything, and then on a phone call after the storm was like, oh yeah, this place floods all the time. But it ruined all of the kids' clothes and all of their personal stuff and the furniture. I mean, it was sort of gushing. So we're at that inflection point. I think we spoke about this last time I was here a couple of years ago, and Danielle has probably heard me say this 800 times. We're at that point where we need to decide whether or not we're gonna like invest and save this place or not. There's repetitive flooding programs that FEMA's had for a long time, and some of you might know that up in the North Miami area, just south of FIU, there was repetitive flooding. They have a criteria and a metric that after a certain number of times, that's it. You can't get flood insurance, they won't insure it, you're really at your own risk. It becomes like Stiltsville, but on land. And we're nearing that area, that point for a lot of places, especially like in the Hollywood, Hallandale area, and then even in Sunny Isles. It's bad in a lot of places. So here's the question. Do we save it? Do we invest in it? Is it worth it or not? And that's the question we have to ask. The best indicator is to get people engaged and informed. So we brought the Senate, who's now the Senate President, was an incoming Senate President, down to our community, the Emergency Management Director down to our community. I filed condo bills that we passed this year 7 years ago, but nobody listened until 98 people died in my district. And then when everybody came down, they're like, we gotta do something about condos. So when the storms come, we bring people down here, especially those that control the checkbook at the state level, and we get to gauge whether or not they want to be a little pregnant or they need it. Like they really want to invest and they understand and appreciate it. We're huge donors to Tallahassee, to the budget, huge. We can beat our chest about $120 billion budgets and surpluses because of us, and Disney World, but because of us. And so, you know, we need to have that seat at the table, and that's what's critically important about flood disclosures. And we can do something about it.
And in the law, there's a disclosure that's required if there has been any flood in the past, so that, like you were mentioning, you don't get a surprise, like, hey, nobody told me that this area flooded. Now that's gonna be required, I mean, it's another form that we're gonna have to do, but it is what it is. There was another bill that passed that had to do with transparency. I'm gonna take all this myself, which one is it? Modernization and communication, HB 615, electronic notices and landlord tenants communication. Does anybody think that? Sorry. And I'm looking for where's Mike? HB 615, does either of the three you want to speak on that? Go.
So, I think the legislature has tried to keep up with the times as far as, real estate transactions, and, I'm gonna throw us back a few years to 2000 when we passed the, electronic, signatures for notarizations, right? It couldn't have happened at a better time in our history because none of us knew that we were about to enter into a pandemic where, you know, we were gonna just see a whole shift into an electronic arena in every sense. And so, I think this is just one more thing that is being added to the list of, you know, convenience and just keeping up with the times, which is a good thing.
You know, you have a lot of investor owners as well. A lot of us don't check our mailbox as much as we used to when we were kids. I do, because my son's at boot camp in the Marine Corps right now, and all you can do is write letters. I can't talk to him on the phone. So I check it every night. Then, you know, guys, I gotta be honest, Senator Claudia's talking about her Live Local bill and how successful it was with her colleagues, and Senator Rodriguez is talking about the eviction bill, whatever, but you gotta understand and appreciate how much sort of pushback we get from a lot of individuals and organizations about what should seem like pretty simple things. So, you know, Senator Rodriguez's eviction bill, we had people come up saying housing and homelessness is such a huge issue, and we have to appreciate that and be sympathetic. And I remember asking, I think it was on your bills, one of the speakers, I said, let me ask you a question. Did you drive here to this committee meeting today? And she said, yes. I said, okay, so your car's parked somewhere down the street? She said, yes. I said, so if you go back to your car right now, there's someone sitting in it. Do you think that you have the right to get them out immediately so you can drive home? She goes, yes. I go, well, what's the difference between that and a residence or a property? To Senator Claudia, over this last summer, it was really two really difficult groups. One were a bunch of land use attorneys who were threatening cities to say, if you didn't give us what we want, we will threaten to build affordable housing. Almost like, you know, as a threat, not as like a button, not as a good thing. And then a bunch of cities also sort of being NIMBYish, saying, yeah, affordable housing is great, just not in our backyard, just not here in our city. So that's what we had to push through a lot, and that's like the pushback. So, I mean, kudos to both of you for being magnanimous about it, but, you know.
We were discussing earlier here, the Live Local, particularly in South Florida, it isn't affordable housing, it's workforce housing. You're not able to feasibly develop anything at those lower levels unless you do a partnership with a governmental entity that gives you the land. So, I mean, as a developer, not a apartment developer, but you see that the costs are where they are, and if they come down, it's great. So let me ask you guys three a question. What did it pass, or do you think something that should be passed? So if you have to go back and carry a flag, not die on the hill, but carry a flag for something that would be of importance to this room, name one. Anna Maria, go.
So we were battling a very strategic and quiet war to preserve the institution that oversees our profession, right? And the FREC, the possibility of losing FREC or eliminating FREC, among other overseeing entities, is a very real threat, even going into this special session or whatever you want to call it this time that we're going to be in Tallahassee. For whatever reason, the Speaker of the House feels that deregulating professions is a big deal. Like he wants to, he's already stated it's one of his top priorities. We're not the only ones that are included in this bag of, deregulation. We're talking about architects, landscape architects. Who am I missing?
Massage therapist.
Massage therapists, Okay, Gus. Yes, is that okay, we're not massage therapists, okay.
I'm not
But we
gonna-
might need them sometimes. But anyway, I'm trying to kind of synthesize what happened. But it was a very, very tough situation because many of our members wanted to take on a public, let's all gear up, let's all, send emails, let's make phone calls. And sometimes you have to kind of take a step back and do a quiet, stealth war. And that's kind of what we did. We did all of our moves behind the scenes. And we basically got the Senate, which we didn't have to convince the Senate, which is, we all said, no way, like this doesn't make sense. Why would anyone want to do this? So I think we were all very vocal, the ones that were asked. I asked our rules chairman, our former president, Kathleen Pasadono, who was one of the masterminds behind Live Local. I said, is this something we would entertain? She says, no way. No way, and I relayed that back to Florida Realtors and to many of you quietly, but that's something that we have to keep an eye on because if the speaker is, obviously he's gonna still be the speaker for the next, session, this could come back. So we just gotta monitor it and make sure it doesn't rear its ugly head.
For your purposes, I think what's contributing to a large glut in inventory is the lack of flexibility with portability. As it relates to a lot of units. And I'm seeing it and hearing it a lot. I think both the time and specifically, in particular, the amount really needs to be increased. There was a time when my grandmother thought still giving, $1 to the kid at the Publix for a bag of groceries was a lot, because it was a lot in her time. But we have far outpaced with inflation and the value of the dollar and all that stuff. I'm hearing from a lot of people, Senator, I would move, I would give up, I would contribute to more affordable inventory if I knew where I could go place those dollars, right? So I think portability is a huge issue. And then I think there's gonna be one more iteration, substantive iteration of a condo bill for this particular purposes. One of the things that I love about going to New York or going to LA is when I'm gonna go grab a cup of coffee or something to eat, there's literally a letter grade on the window. And unless you're on Local 10 going, ooh, I've been to that place before, I didn't know they had roaches and rodent activity. You want a snapshot. So what I think would be incredible, would inure to your benefit, to have a real snapshot. It's very easy to look at a prospectus or to go ahead and look at year-over-year earnings on a publicly traded company and see what their growth is, see what their EBITDA is, and all that stuff. And I think you should be able to get a quick, clandestine, murky, mysterious kind of feeling and vibe about condos, about properties, about the viability and how things are running. And we allowed the last couple bills to sort of to pan out, but we had to go back and we held a specific summit at FAU that Senator Bradley and I financed the whole thing, so there were no vendors and no conflicts of interest. But it was to get the CPAs, the association attorneys, the guys doing the milestone inspections and structural integrity reserves, and be like, guys, you're widely disparate on price, you're widely disparate on interpretation and language. We all need to sort of coalesce and get on the same page to have uniformity in some of those things. On deregulation, Florida bent over backwards for years, ever since I was a kid, to get people here, to get growth, to get activity, to get tourism. So we just sort of acted bare bones. We don't inspect cars. I came down here and I was at the counter getting my driver's license when I came down here for law school, like, hey, I gave you my boating license stuff from New Jersey. Can you add on an endorsement? She's like, we don't have boating licenses. I'm like, what? But that's why in Miami-Dade up to 40% of the cars on the road are uninsured. Because we don't inspect cars, which means registrations don't get inspected, which means auto insurance doesn't get inspected, which means your rates are incredibly high. But at the same time, we thought we were doing something great by reducing. Does anybody know how many hours you need to be a barber in the state of Florida? It used to be 1,200 hours. Now it's down to 900. It's 40 hours to get your private pilot license, but it's 900 hours for them to screw this up. It's so disjointed, it's so out of place, and honestly, we let sort of industry without regulation go too far at a too fast a pace, and we let those that true small businesses, true entrepreneurs get held down by the horrors of being like a small business in Miami-Dade County where you need to get your local business tax, your county business tax, wait 3 weeks for Durham to come peek in the window and see if you're not like manufacturing crystal meth, that you really are a real estate office. I mean, those are the people that got sort of held down, not promoted, not incubated, not helped. And we went ahead and let other sort of industries or individuals and entities, you know, sort of run afoul and put us in a place where we have some pretty expensive fixing to do.
By the way, your barber definitely had his $1,200. Your barber had his $1,200. We could tell it's perfect.
This is actually a tube. This is a toupee. I went with the one with a little bit more gray, so I didn't.
Senator Catali, any bills, anything that you think or you want to push, go for it. This is your chance. You have a room of voters.
How exciting. I think, you know, Senator Don Gates, former Senate President, returned to the Senate this year, and he's been one hell of a colleague. He brought an accessory dwelling unit bill, and so I filed a bill on that topic last year and it didn't move. And this year it went almost to the end of session. So I'm really curious on how I can partner with him to support him this next year, and what we can work on with the rules chair, Casadomo, what we can think together as you know, the Senate. What's the concept? Because it's an additional tool in the toolbox for access to attainable housing and options. And who that helps, I remember when I was knocking doors and I would knock on the front door and ask for Teresa. And they're like, oh, go in the backyard. And I'm like, I'm gonna die. And so I go to the back, and then there's a little side door, and I knock on the side of the door, and it's an accessory dwelling unit, essentially. And Teresa's a librarian at the public library, and she's my age, and that's where she can afford to live. But she's doing her thing, and so.
She still makes more than you do, though.
Yeah.
We get paid like $8 a day. That's why I'm joking. Okay.
Yeah. But like, you can still buy a sandwich with that. So anyway, I think this is important. I'd like to work with him on it. It did not get across the finish line, and there's folks with different opinions on it, and I think maybe we bring those into the conversation. We figure out what we need to do to provide more options. That's just what it's got to be.
It's a really good bill. It was SB 184. I was going to be a no because reflexively, the 20 cities that I represent, their concern is always about short-term rental and, you know, the process of being able to marshal that and control that. We got our cities to get wise, Gus, to start putting code enforcement people at nighttime because, you know, not everything happens during banking hours. The real nuisance problems are Saturday mornings at 2 a.m. But then our previous, not the last, but the Senate President before that, because he was getting complaints about nuisance at his farm that he was having a lot of events at, changed the law as it relates to filing complaints. You can't do it anonymously anymore. So all of a sudden, you have a situation where you can have a single mom with 2 kids who's just complaining about 2 a.m. drunken parties at an Airbnb, and she's got to put her name and home address on the complaint, which gets delivered to the owner, which makes it a retaliatory sort of target, which is not a good idea. I think that should have been changed. But I voted for SB 184 because I took a look at it. Senator Gates is from Niceville, Florida. Literally, it's nice, it's Niceville. And he was proposing ADUs, and I took a look at it, so I went on his Muni code. Exciting nights in Tallahassee. And I took a look at the R1A lots. They're 5,000 square feet. They have 25-foot front yard setbacks, 20-foot rear, 5-yard sides, 40% impervious coverage maximum. So it's a 2,600 square foot building footprint that you can go on. I walked him through it in a committee meeting, and I said, you're still going to have to comply. Nothing in this bill would supersede or preempt any of them. He goes, nope. And I go, I'm voting for the bill. So Senator Claudia's point, my grandmother, who insisted on living in her home until she was 96 in Lyndhurst, New Jersey, had a nice little couple that lived sort of upstairs, detached from the house. And it was wonderful when there was an emergency or there was a problem, or to check in on it. Here was the poison pill. We sent it over, we voted, we got it to a good place. It went to the House. The House removed, because this is my hesitation, removed the condition that they can be ADUs and considered for that inventory so long as the occupancy is 30 days or more, right? Because anything less is basically truly transient. The House removed it, that was the poison pill, and your whole kind of presentation about how this is for accessory dwelling unit for affordability, to increase affordable housing unit, all of a sudden become, how much can I get jammed for, hedge fund guys in there for an F1 weekend, right? It really wasn't about people here. So to the point of the theme of all this is, and getting back to what the holdup in Tallahassee is how do we give back, deliver, or reciprocate assistance to Floridians, to homestead, to families, to actual people? And the Senate's idea is not to save a couple pennies on sales tax to 142 million tourists. It's actually to help Florida families. And that's really sort of where we're geared towards.
By the way, you don't need to send the code enforcement and just ask the garbage people when you see a house with 6 garbage cans and it's 1,000 square foot home. That's to look. We think it's very highly, all right?
Because if I could just.
I was not going to mention the city.
I want to talk a little bit more about the accessory dwelling unit bill because there was I guess a misinterpretation by local governments that it would mandate ADUs, and it didn't. What it did was it said local governments would have to create their own policy surrounding accessory dwelling units. And for those of you who have been around for a while, and I've seen many familiar faces, you've seen that Miami-Dade County, we passed accessory dwelling unit legislation here. Our county commissioner, Raquel Regalado, sponsored an item a few years ago, and some of you actually went and voiced your support for it. And basically, I think it's a 7,500 square foot or larger lot would allow for these types of units in unincorporated Dade County, not in municipalities. But this is a big step in the right direction because, like you said, you say, okay, it has to be 30 days or more, but it's targeted at the returning college student that can't afford to live in their own place yet, so they can buy some time in a little cottage. Or the abuelita that, needs a place to live and it's close to the house. It's like a few steps away from the house. So it just makes a lot of sense on so many levels.
I agree. I think it's something that we all should, if it comes back next year, push and help for it because it is affordable housing, workforce housing. So I have time for questions. If we're gonna give me questions, I don't have any questions from the audience. Oh, microphone. Nobody has a microphone.
Well, property taxes, like, you have the governor here trying to.
So I'm all about keeping the local, the Floridians here, and I think affordability is also a big issue. I'm seeing I'm a Miami native, a lot of my friends are leaving. They can't afford to upsize. They're having 2 kids, they can't afford the 4-bedroom house. So I am with you on portability, but I also think homestead exemption, 50,000 when it was 500 grand average price point, that's 10%. But now 50,000 on $1 million home is half a percentage. So I think that's one way we can help, or can we help the homestead residents have a lower tax bill and keep the the investors to keeping the property tax bill. So what's right now, how are we helping them?
Very good question. You're absolutely right. It was 1978 when we installed the first dollar amount, and it really hasn't adjusted for it at all. There was our joint resolution to referendum to go ahead and adjust it, on an inflationary index. But the reality is that it was sort of political in nature, even 46 years ago. And we just have to ask ourselves, do we want to help sort of at the bottom end of first dollars in, or do you want to help sort of at the top end, and capping it down? My concern about how the state is being run, and I've said this many times, some of these two will cringe once in a while when I say certain things, and God bless Senator Claudia because she sits kind of behind me, so she's always on TV when I'm saying these things, so she's got a good poker face. But here's the answer to your question. We have a lot of people who read a lot of books on economics and leadership, but no one that really understands finance. They think of dollars in a vacuum. And you remember during COVID, some of you may have applied for the up to $50,000 that was available to 1,000 small businesses at a $50 million clip. And my first question to the chief of staff of the governor at the time was, how much have you pushed back out? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you loan out 50 grand, 8,000 businesses applied, it was oversubscribed. And one of the conditions of PPP was you have to pay it back. How many times did you push that same 50,000 back out to the next company sort of in line? And they're like 0. Like, guys, that's not how it works. That's not how banks work, that's not how finance works. So here's the issue. A lot of big donors to politicians are a lot of the investors buying or building and holding. That's the reality. Even the ones that do you remember the governor in particular was very critical over a few investment firms like 24 months ago, and then up to about 18 months ago. And then you didn't hear boo. You know what I mean? So we have to ask ourselves, what's affordable, and understand that. There are 40 state senators. There are only 7 of us living in particular sections of Tampa and Miami-Dade and Broward that understand and appreciate what's affordable, what's workforce. An assistant state attorney or public defender in Miami-Dade makes the same as they do in Ocala and Tallahassee in the Panhandle, where for $55,000, $56,000 a year, you can live okay. How about here? Yeah. Cops, teachers, firemen. How many of you watched the First 48? You guys all watched the First 48? I'm going to embarrass you, Passmore. So Mrs. Passmore, who's one of your fantastic brokers, is married to this guy on the right. And Pass, when you started, how many years ago did you start? This is the famous Detective Passmore, City of Miami Homicide Police Department, now retired. Gus's question is, I can't have him 2.5 hours away from work. How many times did you handle homicide where a kid was shot and killed? Dozens, right? I want him to be within a half an hour of home. I want him to say, honey, I'm gonna pop home, see the kids, have dinner, and then I can go back out and chase the bad guy. Or your kid's teacher, your 3rd grade teacher, should not have to drive from Kendall all the way to Sunny Isles to go to the Norman Hilltop Middle School. And your city officials, God bless them, I would never want to be in a city council or commission, but your city officials may campaign and run and file and send mail out about affordable housing, but then they go to the commission, no way in hell do they want workforce housing being built. And I was raised, my dad used to say cops, teachers, and firemen should be able to live in and around the cities where they serve. And what was your starting salary?
Oh, wow. That was back in 1989.
How much?
Probably about 35.
Okay, in 1989, when I graduated law school and became an assistant state attorney, and then later a homicide prosecutor working with you, not 1989, in 2011, my starting salary was $38,000. How confident do you feel if you're, God forbid, the victim of a violent crime or a financial crime, that the people you're entrusted to get justice and closure to the community? And so this is to Gus's questions and the point about housing, affordability, transportation, resiliency, all of these things. The reason why CFOs of Florida in the last dozen years have never stood at a podium and announced the relocation of a major corporation establishing or expanding their footprint in Florida is for the following reason. It's very tough to get due process here as a company, to get some dispute resolved, to get justice passed. It got to the point in Miami-Dade County, for every shooting and homicide not domestic violence related, our arrest by closure rate was what, 10% in some parts of South Dade, not in the city of Miami, but South Dade?
Yeah.
About 10%. In North Dade, about 7%. 93 out of every 100 shootings and homicides were going without an arrest or closure. Companies look at that, and they look at quality of life and look at the public school system and see that Florida spends 1/4 what New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and Massachusetts spend. So we can beat our chest on how great it is, but my dad, my late father, said it best. He goes, you know why I'm the perfect Florida resident? And he established residency, bought a house in Jupiter. He goes, I don't go to school, I don't get on the roads during rush hour, I don't tax government goods and services, and I contribute to the economy and to small businesses. And that's who a lot of politicians, because that's also who the donors are, sort of cater to. And to some extent, it's important to your industry and that transaction. But you know what got lost in that is the accountability and the ability. Here's the biggest concern I have for you guys. What we do up in Tallahassee can sometimes damage your reputation or your ability to appear and to convey confidence and being engaged and educated on the issues, because we are so mercurial and fluid and changing and not really understanding that issue. And that's why, like doing a pitch for Danielle and for the association. You guys have incredible people that keep us informed, that keep, obviously with Anne-Marie, that keep us at the forefront and to understand these issues. Because the reality is that I don't want to put them in a weird spot, I don't mind saying it, I'm kind of liberated. Most of the people controlling your destiny, your quality of life, and your profession have not read the bill. Most of the legislators have not read the bill that they're voting on, much less understand it. So this is why these things are so important. I mean, that's sort of, it's honest.
Who would like to ask another question?
Hi, my question is on insurance. I just got my Windstone bill. And I called my insurance agent and I said, "What's up?" He said, "Just be quiet and pay it." I'm paying about $22,000 a year for 3 policies. What's going on?
So, go ahead.
Let me ask you one quick question. Is that more or less than last year?
It's about 10 or 15% more.
More? Okay.
So everybody beat their chest about, oh, this is a great insurance bill we're voting for, and within 12 to 18 months, you're gonna see savings and all that stuff, and it never came, and the 9 new companies that came in because they realized they could write policies, and now you have to go out of pocket for the attorney to chase the same dollars that you don't have to pay for an attorney. That's the reality. Your insurance went up. The new 9 companies that came in, none of them were running condo, one finally has. I was paying $37,000 for a Citizens $1 million policy on a condo in Sunny Isles. I don't have a mortgage, I've never had a property insurance claim. The statutory maximum they can charge for $600,000 to $1 million in coverage is actually $28,000. So imagine the CEO, Tim Serio, surprised when I made him sit at my dining room table and explain to me why I was paying $9,000 more than he's legally allowed to charge me. It's all screwed up. It's all incredibly screwed up and there's no accountability for it. It's not based on actuarial studies and analysis, and it goes back to the economic theory and not finance. And you know what the short answer is? That the CFO who just left vacated a seat to go run for Congress in the Panhandle. His largest donors were insurance companies, and he's the one that's supposed to be marshaling and administering enforcement and penalizing and going after insurance companies, and never have. And when we finally issued a $1 million penalty against a company, he went on Twitter and said it was such a big mistake. That's the reality, because they get a couple $1 million in donations. So what can we do about property insurance? We should make it actuarially sound, but it's a careful what you wish for kind of situation. We have people that are like, you know, I can't afford, 12, but if we did an actuarial study, they probably should be twice as much. But then you have, a situation where, and I don't blame my colleagues that voted for the bill, because a lot of the parts were good. But do you guys remember a couple years ago when the Florida legislature put in a flood insurance requirement for any residential unit in a flood zone? Yeah, I'm on the 22nd floor. No. It was $4,100 extra to my insurance policy. That's their brain. They're thinking in a two-dimensional, oh, he's on the coast, so he has to have flood insurance. 326 feet above the street. Not a pipe bursting on. So let me just tell you what we did. This is a big thing. Won't be on the news. We had a major, very successful investor that lives in Bal Harbor, super Howard Hughes type, cooler and warmer than Elon Musk. Deals in commodities, but he came up with a very simple idea. He built this, anybody ever been to Bal Harbor lately? When you're going over the bridge from Sunny Isles to Bal Harbor, you think it's a hotel, it's a massive 3-story white house. And during the last big storm we had, he had wind-driven rain into his unit, into the house. The largest property loss for insurance companies leader right now, especially in multifamily properties, is wind-driven rain. We never gave a single mitigation credit. When you buy a car, you call your insurance company, like, I just bought this. All right, send me over the purchase order. They can see the mitigation credits they get, airbags, seatbelts, alarm, anti-theft, all that stuff. We weren't considering any kind of mitigation credit for wind-driven rain devices. We still use sandbags at your local city. He developed this concept where he just puts a strip along the landing strip on sliding doors. And Home Depot was like all about it, super excited about it. I had to get the Department of Emergency Management Director, Kevin Guthrie, to nudge the legislature and the Office of Insurance Regulation to view the FIU wall of wind study that showed that it was 50 times more effective than anything else, just to get it included in a bill for consideration to be considered for a mitigation credit for the insurance company. One building in Naples suffered $27 million of wind-driven, the Ritz-Carlton, in the last hurricane that we had. In one condo building, and they had just rubber strips along the base. So you're paying for the legislature and the industry's inability to sit down at a table and actually hash out actuarially sound policies, because a lot of constituent bases would be unhappy with what the real price would be. You're paying $22,000, single family detached or multifamily? How many on the water? You're not a sympathetic victim, like that.
Thank you very much for being here today and answering all these questions and giving us so much information. Where I live in Northwood Village, we're a small community, and when we speak about affordable housing and workforce housing, I think of the older buildings, which really are the workforce housing in our neighborhood, especially with all the new construction coming up. We're talking about not just luxury, but ultra luxury. The average person would have to buy a $1 million condominium to move in. That is not your average resident in Northwood Village. The problem that I've seen going on is that there's a lot of work being done to help condominiums stay stable, strong, resilient. But the problem I see, especially in my building, I live in a 1971 building, 12 units, and you're absolutely right, we cannot agree on the day of the week. It's impressive. We are governed by people who are making these decisions for the entire condominium. And there's no protections for us, the rest of the residents, to fight when the president doesn't want to do an assessment. The president doesn't want to buy the right, hire the right vendor to seal the building. And us as residents, I'm a board member, and I'm outvoted by the majority. And most of them are senior citizens who look at it as, well, I'm not going to be here in the next 10 years. I don't care if the pool doesn't work. I don't care about the landscaping. I don't go outside. Or, I live on a very, limited income. I cannot afford an assessment. So they're making these decisions that keep delaying the maintenance of the building. And in order for us to survive and keep these buildings, they need not just updates, but upgrades for the future. And I just don't understand, how do we limit that power? Yes, we do have a management.
They do have a management company.
Yeah, and even
I mean, Pizzo is the.
305-505-8478.
There were tweets in the condo law that address the condominium management, the association, the rec.
Microphone.
I have this microphone. It's very empowering.
Okay, who sells single-family detached homes? Who does that? Okay. How would you explain to somebody who's not in your industry the following question? Why is it that there's a house for sale in a 10,000 square foot lot for $1.5 million, and there's a 10,000 square foot vacant lot right next door to it that's for sale for about the same price? How do you explain that?
The opportunity of building something bigger, better, newer is more expensive to a new buyer.
Condos are, to some extent, there's a Venn diagram of overlap, where if you're talking about a multifamily product that was built in 1976 with 8-foot ceilings, and it's not marketable, and it's not what people are seeing on Instagram feeds and all that stuff, and bam, let's LFG Miami, right? Then the dirt becomes much more valuable. And I've been to a couple places, as you know, in North Bay Village, and I remember Bay Harbor Islands seeing in a couple places going, this dirt is worth more than all of these units combined, far in excess. So that's sort of the question to sort of ask yourself when you get a lot of resistance. My job is to make sure that if there really is the abuela in the apartment who's on a fixed income, that when they said, give us more time, I had to ask the tough question, which is, Senora, honestly, let me ask you a question. If I give you another year, are you getting a part-time job in between? No, their income circumstances are not going to change. They just want to put it off until it's somebody else's problem. But the reason why there's value just in vacant land is for two reasons. One, because you can basically design what you want, but number two, to build something that's now currently not going to be functionally obsolete to its highest and best use. And most of the properties that we're talking about fall into the category of not being its highest and best use. If you're seeing a 3-story building that's multifamily within a half a mile of the coast, it's not the highest and best use from a development perspective. But I'll go to your condo meeting next week.
Hi, well, first, thank you all for coming. I was at the Condo Summit a month or two ago, and again, I appreciate you coming and doing this, and obviously for those of us that are in the room, we are trying to find out this information, be the best purveyors of it to our consumers and our customers and clients. However, I'm all about transparency. I want my buyers and my sellers, when I'm dealing with condos, to have all the information at their disposal to make an informed decision. And so I love that, like, the new condo buyer has these extra questions that are about the milestone report, the developer turnover study, the SURS study. Homeowners don't know they can't make sense of that. Condo owners, they don't know what any of that is. They don't have the training on it. So it's left to us to try to get those filled out, and who's gonna fill it out, especially if we're on the buyer side, or even if we're on the seller side. We have to tell our homeowner, because associations of property managers will not talk to us. So when you pass these bills, can there not be a companion piece that goes along with that requires the associations or the property managers to communicate with us?
I just sold one of my condos in Sunny Isles last month, and I, as an overeducated legislator who writes condo legislation, could not, in good conscience, answer some of those disclosure forms myself. And I asked myself, if I can't, then I don't know anybody else in the room that can. So it's an excellent point. It was Kayla, remember this? I was like, in good faith, let's just write, I don't know, I have no knowledge of, whatever, and then, someone's gonna say, shouldn't you have known that? So to your point, we really need to button that up.
And what he's referring to, if I can real quick, it's the condo writer, and it's who fills out the initial offer. The buyer and the buyer's agents fill it out, and that's one of the questions on there. But under the law, it does say seller is required to provide this information. The issue is it doesn't start with the seller. The buyer is the one who's making that offer, and they want the whole list. So Florida Realtors and George Guerra is here. George, raise your hand, because they are looking at it right now. On the condo writer, they're gonna say seller must complete the condo writer, because all of those questions under the law, the seller is the one who should be answering that, not the buyer.
I get that. I'd like to just add to that. Food for thought. Look at our Miami MLS, look at the condo listings. Maybe 5% have anything attached, any documents attached whatsoever. Buyers are supposed to be presented this in advance of submitting their offer. Maybe 90% of the time they aren't. We can't get it.
Right.
So now what we're doing, and this is all about helping consumers, in particular residential home purchasers. Now they're under the time clock of, I've got to make my application for my loan, I've got to make the application for the association, I've got to have an inspection done, and as a buyer's agent, I don't have any of those documents to fill out that condo writer, and I'm now trying to get it. 3 weeks later, I finally get it, this building's a mess, and they've already shelled out $1,000.
Right. So I have a solution for I think it's 86% of all multifamily, 87% of condo buildings, especially in Miami-Dade County, is a little higher. The simple solution is, I am legally required as a condo resident to inform the building if I've had a leak or this or that. So who should have a running tickler file of each and every single unit, the condition status, claims, filings, all of that stuff, is management. And I know that not gonna wanna hear it, but the onus, because there's a lot of self-managed buildings. The largest condo building in my district, 1,249 units, the Hemispheres in Hallandale, on 17.2 acres on the beach, and they're bitching about a $30,000 assessment, is self-managed, okay? My point is, the management company downstairs knows about every leak, about every problem, about every claim, about every filing, about all of this, and 2/3 of that seller disclosure, by the way, the interpretation is it's the seller's responsibility. I realize where the offer comes from. I think we can burden shift a little bit, that management knows or should know how to answer all of those questions, because I am obliged and obligated to inform them and keep them informed about my common area of ownership as it relates to that whole disclosure, because a lot of those questions are about the entirety of the property as well. So management's a solution for that, and then whoever's the licensed camp, if it's self-managed, I think the onus should be on them to answer those questions.
Thank you.
And we agree, look at changing that part of the law. Any other questions here?
limited time, because I would like.
There's a big protest in my office right now, so you guys take as long as you want. No, there's literally, what?
They don't know.
There are protesters at my office, because they're changing our party affiliation. And, I think we're buying a pizza. Yeah, we're buying a pizza, right?
Just to share the previous conversation in the condo zoning, legal counsel for the board shared a PowerPoint form. We have it on file, so I haven't deployed it yet, but it seems pretty effective, might work for the previous questions.
It's referring to the new condo docs. You can find it in Form Simplicity or on our condo resource page, miamirealtors.com/condo. Sign in, the condo forms are there. And the association has 10 business days to turn it over, or the owner can charge them $50 per day on the 11th day up to $500 per day.
Just to pick up on what you just said, the problem with the seller's disclosure is that the sellers don't know. If you go to the association, they don't want to take the liability of putting something in there that will screw up that sale for that seller. So unless you as legislation say you are mandated to provide transparency and you got to provide the information, and no, you're not liable if the sale doesn't go through, because now you're saying, yes, this building has XYZ problems, you're going to have a problem.
George, perhaps a humble suggestion would be, it remains the ultimate responsibility of the seller, but it must be reviewed by management for any inconsistencies or irregularities, or vice versa. Management fills it out and the seller then puts it, but you gotta have a second pair of eyes before it goes out the door, because a lot of your clients, a lot of owners, really in good faith don't know. But I also think it's unfair to a buyer not to be told just because somebody was completely negligent, before they sold it. So, a second pair of eyes.
It affects their finances. They should know before they make that offer.
Also, closing out permits is a hassle as well. That needs to, when we sold one of the condos last month, like a guy did something on the bathroom was still open, and like I got new AC units from like a year and a half ago and it was still open. Like those need to be closed.
I just have a suggestion in how I do as a listing agent for condos. When I get my listing, the first thing I do is I get that seller disclosure, and I do send it to the association. Because I do think it should come from the seller, but also if there is an issue, I need to inform the seller, because that can affect the price, the transaction. So as soon as the listing agent that I get it, I automatically send it to the association. I did have a hiccup when the staff said, I don't know these questions, and I go, I believe you have an attorney. Ask your attorney, and he answered my questions.
All right, so we're at time limit. What I want to ask each one of our esteemed senators is, what can we What I'd like to ask is, what can we, as an association, do to make your lives easier when stuff that's important to us is coming forward or giving you ideas? What can we do for you? So we'll start with Ana Maria and we'll end with Alexis.
Keep me
Jason's
employed.
not gonna
Keep
answer.
my job. Because we only make $8 a day in the legislature. But no, seriously, it is such an honor to work here and to have such amazing colleagues and all of you. We're very easy to find, not just me, because I work here, but all of us are just super accessible. And just keep in touch. We have what's known as the Keep Contact Program, and I see a number of you in the audience. Just make sure that you keep in touch with your legislators, and if something comes up, make sure you loop in the government affairs team. But we also encourage you as key contacts to reach out directly to the elected officials.
My suggestion, and I'll participate, I'll help, I'll chip in. You guys have a wonderful organization, wonderful staff, wonderful facility. Every generation is now generally a visual learner. Nobody's really reading anymore. So this would be a national model if the Miami Realtors got together and just did some simple video series, instructional videos. Make it simple. Go back to Schoolhouse Rock. And we thought of this concept actually when we're talking to guys over at Moss Construction, like from dirt to construction to components to parts, and do the whole thing visual and just do a whole video series. Because everyone's really now a visual learner. They can watch it at their own, you know, at their sort of own pace. And then sprinkle in legislators, industry experts, you know, GCs, architects, engineers, lawyers, to talk about that. Just do a whole video series, so someone, a layperson, can sit down, watch 5 or 6 episodes, and know where we are, and know what the law is, and know what the interpretation is, so you don't have to nudge, you know, you don't have to tell people how to do their job, because they're not doing it. And I think that would be wonderful. People are visual learners with a short attention span. Let's do a video series from dirt through development.
I think all I'd add, other than keep in contact with us on the off season and use the amazing tools that Miami Realtors has to create this kind of content that would be an incredible explainer. The only other thing I'd say is continue your timely advocacy. I think the best example I have is when we were working on the Live Local Act 2 years ago, so the second iteration of the policy, and we almost took out industrial as one of the zoning categories that you could build a Live Local project, and it was right between committees. So sometimes there's this, people just don't have the right staff, and you guys have the right team. That they wait till the last second, or the second has passed in which we can engage on something, and then we're stuck. But timely advocacy, which you all are incredible at, but feeling both during session, especially during session and during committee weeks, continued working on giving us the information we need in the most timely fashion, gives us the opportunity to do something with it, and to ultimately improve the work that you guys are able to do every day. So in addition to constant relationship building and constant relationship maintenance with your elected officials in the House and the Senate, and with the ability that you have with your team to put out incredible content, it's also that continued timely engagement with us. It's not just about having the relationship, it's in the right moment, providing us the information we need to make a difference.
Before I let them go and before we give them an incredible round of applause, we have an award that we didn't give out at, oh, he's got it here. There you go. Mr. Pizzo, Senator Pizzo, since you didn't pick it up. This is the Condo Advocate of the Year, 2024, Jason Pizzo. I have a quick story. At the condo summit, Jason Pizzo, Senator Pizzo, gave out his cell phone number, and I thought he's crazy to do that with a bunch of realtors. And like 4 days later, I got a call from one of my team members that a buyer that was trying to buy a first-time home buyer condo was getting a request from the association that they needed a 10% deposit in order for them to process the application. So I said, let's find out if this Pizzo guy's for real. I sent him a text message. 5 minutes later, calls me, got your message, working on it. Next day, the association said, oh, we don't need that anymore. We'll process the application.